All right, boys, let's get the motor in. We gotta figure out all the accessories. I got a bunch of new parts for this thing. I wanna just replace everything I possibly can. We're gonna do all the pulleys, power steering pump, starter, and then we'll be ready to wire this thing. Gotta find a throttle cable, do some stuff with the intake and exhaust, then we'll be able to fire this thing. So let's start slapping parts on this. Don't want to use that. I know that doesn't look the best because it's not brand new, but I threw this on from the other motor I have because I took the other one apart to paint and the bearings inside are pretty messed up, so I think I'll end up rebuilding this one or buying a brand new black one to match the theme of this. I'd say one of my favorite features that we're about to throw on the truck is the X-pipe, 2.5 inch all the way back. The Black Widow Venom 250 mufflers. 2 of those will be right after the X-pipe. And then I've got a bunch of random tubing to try to throw these pipes behind these headers. So these headers are shorties and they end literally right next to the trans. So I've got some tubing to try to run it down. X-pipe right about here, and then we'll dump it before the axle. Pretty much see through that thing. And there's some welds on there. It's got like this like X shape inside there. These should be pretty loud with the LS, 2.5 inch exhaust all the way back. Shorty headers, stage 2 cam. I cannot wait to hear this thing. Now that the engine is in the truck, transmission, transfer case, all that good stuff, we have a lot of parts to slap on this thing, hook up a lot of things before we can get it running. One of the main things is the fuel system. So on the factory setup, there's a feed and return fuel line that goes into the fuel rails on top of the intake manifold. Well, we've got a set of aftermarket fuel rails and then a Corvette style fuel regulator that goes in between the tank and the fuel rails, and that only has one line, which is the feed, going into the fuel rails on top of the intake. Anyway, the best way to do that is to get a really good looking intake on top of this thing, which will be a nice upgrade for the engine bay. We gotta do that before the fuel rails. Let's throw the intake on, and then we can get everything else buttoned up and get this thing started. And now we get to put the intake on. possibly the best part. The 102 throttle body, this thing is huge. I don't know if this is gonna make our, 6,000 pound truck any faster. It's sure gonna look good and sound good though. I think that's a working throttle body. That might have been the easiest part of the swap so far. I was so anxious to put the front end on this thing. I've got a few more things to button up, run the coolant lines, finish the trans lines that go into the radiator, and run the battery cables. We're pretty much good to go. All the wiring is done under the dash, and I think all the wiring's done in the engine bay. It's super dark out now, and I'm gonna wait until tomorrow to button all this stuff up. I gotta make a couple parts store runs, so we should be in business tomorrow, which for you guys is gonna be in the next about 5 seconds. And then we're gonna hear this thing run. The trans is filled with 3 gallons of ATF. The motor is filled with 5W30 synthetic oil, which I think I'm gonna let it run for, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or something, and then we'll change that. No coolant in the truck. I need one more coolant line, but I really wanna see if this thing starts up, and then I can button up all the wiring, make it look really fancy under the dash, and get this thing driving. Let's see if it starts. It's not gonna run. Good. Ryan came out with the computer. We got her fixed up. Now that I figured out that this thing can fire up and it runs on its own, there's still a lot of stuff we gotta do to this thing to be able to drive it. One of which includes the electric fans. Gotta mount those on the radiator and wire those in, and then fill it with coolant. Gotta put some more bolts in the front end so it stays together when I drive it. And I need a battery tray for the driver's side of the truck. Let's get to it.